Honourable Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. In my last contribution, I said that there were 5 questions which I felt the public should ask themselves about Section 18 and the regime that sets out. And transparency was the 5th one that I wanted to ask. The first 4 had been, why should it just be 2 ministers who make the decision? The second one was, how robust really is this regime in terms of providing a comprehensive way of looking at reporting on our environment? The third one was, can consultation really amount to independent decision making, which it obviously cannot. The fourth one was, what about the difficult issue of decisions not to report at all? Would anyone ever know about that? I think those are 4 very important questions which the public of New Zealand should ask about this section and about the government's motives in pushing it forward. What could they possibly be? What has the government got to hide? What is it that it wants to do other than just making sure that ministers can secure even more executive power to themselves? And we have seen this government year after year, bill after bill, issue after issue, coming down on the side of let's give more executive responsibility to ministers and let's have less democracy, less transparency and less independent decision making where it's appropriate in New Zealand. And I haven't heard any rebuttal of those arguments from the members opposite. But I did want to just finish off with that 5th question that I said the public should ask themselves, and that is, why aren't we seeing much more transparency when it comes to regulations which will prescribe the topics to be covered in synthesis reports and the topics to be covered in domain reports? And of course, that's very important, because without transparency, you don't get public trust and you don't get the public feeling that we have a system with integrity. So it goes right to the root of this particular bill and why we need an environmental reporting system. It has to be one that the public can trust. It has to be one which has integrity. This bill doesn't deliver it and hasn't a hope in hell of doing so, quite frankly. And what does transparency really mean? I'll have to give the members opposite a little bit of a lesson in this, because they don't seem to understand. And in particular, Mr Ducey, when I heard his speech, didn't seem to understand it. They use the word, but obviously don't know what they're talking about when they use it. So first of all, it means that the background information upon which the decision made must be clear. It must relate to the decision made. So that should be set out and understood by everyone. And of course, it has to show what the decision is in detail, and it has to say why the topics selected were the highest in priority and why others were not. And indeed, it has to say what topics which could have been reported on are in fact not going to be reported on. And finally, it has to set out what the discussion is and what the reasoning is which led to the decision being made. Those are the sorts of considerations that add up to transparency. Those are the sorts of considerations that people want to know about when they look at what the ministers are doing in their regulations to decide whether they are the correct decisions or not. That's what transparency means. That's what this bill doesn't do. It just gives an executive power to 2 ministers to pass regulations, just giving the conclusion, just saying, here is what we've decided, full stop. And okay, there is consultation, and that's a step in the right direction, but it's a very, very tiny step compared to what is really required for independent decision making, and one which is made with a transparent regime of decision making. And this is not what the public's going to see as a result of this bill. The bill is going to be a failure, Mr Chairman, simply for those reasons. And it's a shame, because we all want a good regime of environmental reporting. And so I could compliment the government for bringing legislation forward that actually creates a system of environmental reporting. But at the same time, I would have to say this bill is so defective that there's no way that any responsible party in opposition could possibly support it.
Mr Chair.
Nuke Karako.
Kia ora, kai whakahaere. I move that the question be now put.